rattle on for 25 or 30 minutes talking about you and all the many things you've done.
Well, you've mentioned my name. I think that's probably
Okay.
adequate. Unless there's anything else you want to add, I will just DIY it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. Unless you have any
No, I
special
think you're probably
plaudits to mention.
more knowledgeable about yourself than I am about you. So. But I think many people know Robin Moore, who is, of course, has been both a scholar of Buddhist texts and a former monk. So I'll let you carry it on from there.
Oh, okay, thank you, Tom.
Just one more announcement, Roger. So
Sorry.
when I'm here, I usually take photos of the speaker and of the audience. And according to the Thai Privacy and Data Protection Act, we have to get consent. So if anyone doesn't want to be photographed, just raise your hand or I won't take photos.
Super. I think we've got permission.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Can you hear me with the mic in this position? Yeah, good. Most of the faces are familiar. But just to ask, as I usually do, is there anyone here who is new to Little Bang? Wow, okay, one. And are you new to Buddhism? It's exploring. Okay, very good. Yeah, good. Okay. So normally I choose a theme on a subject that I happen to be working on. I'm for the last 15 years after I disrobed. I was a monk for a fairly long time in the Ajahn Chah tradition, ordained with Ajahn Sumedho in England, and then spent 6 years here in Thailand and started translating as a monk. But then when I disrobed, found that it was a handy career option and so I could sustain myself, and that's what I've been doing. I'm now semi-retired, so I don't have a theme right now because the project that I'm working on, one in particular, is on editing the Jataka tales, or the previous life stories of the Buddha, and that's what I gave my talk on 6 months ago. So this evening's talk, I think I'll weave into why I've chosen this topic as the talk progresses, but I didn't call it the Buddhist, what did I call it? I call it the Buddhist view on assisted dying, and only when looking into this subject on the internet a bit more, I realized that assisted dying is not the same, or not exactly the same, as assisted suicide. And I really will be focusing primarily on assisted suicide. But I didn't choose that word because I think it's a Latin word, just kill oneself. It's pretty literal. But it's a heavy word. So I thought I might frighten some of you away. Assisted dying, I learned, is an umbrella term for assisted suicide, euthanasia, and then palliative sedation. So sometimes if someone is dying, you may not be just, it might not be straightforward euthanasia, like, okay, time to pull the plug on this person, but it could be that you just increase the dosage of medication, not with the aim of killing them, but in the process you might be accelerating their death. So there are these three headings. And so, first of all, it's a good day to be alive. And it's been a difficult year. I'm not going to go into the details, and I'm not thinking of killing myself, at least not seriously. But the thought crossed my mind, like, why not? When it gets really rough, why not? Now, there's many ways in which one could answer that question, and some people might say, oh, well, it's against, say, the Buddhist philosophy or the Buddhist teachings, and or some people, there are many, I think if we, it is quite a private conversation in some ways. I think a lot of people, I don't know, I've never really made a survey, asked people, like, have you ever thought of killing yourself? Because, again, it's so personal and so intense. And also, I've never, fortunately, known anyone close to me who has committed suicide, but I know it's particularly difficult for the people, the survivors, because the thought comes up, well, is there more that I could have done to help? And so, I don't know how most people would answer. Like, have you ever thought about killing yourself? Some people might be quite embarrassed or shy, like, oh, no, you know. And some people probably would answer that question honestly and say, no, I haven't. I imagine there are people that would reply in that way. And for most of my life, it's not been an issue. I know that when things do get really rough, then it's almost like there's this, it's like you're sitting around the campfire and there are kind of wolves circling. There's this sort of, there is that option, and we have free will to a great extent, and so tonight's talk it's a loose collection of my own reflections on this topic, and so partly it's because I've had I had a couple of operations and difficult, and just so for me it's been more physical. That has been the challenge. Just wow, you know, this. I was listening to a song. Is it by Lenka? The show is like, I want my money back. You know, it's like. And then she says, all right, just sit back and enjoy the show. Now, sometimes we can do that, but yeah, when I lived with Ajahn Sumedho for quite a few years, and one of his common themes was, don't be surprised. It's difficult to be a human being because it's just very basic. We have these nervous systems, and so we're constantly coming in. It's not just, okay, there's sense contact. Generally, it's fairly neutral, but just the fact that we have these nervous systems mean that there's going to be a fair amount of physical discomfort and even pain. I think I'd be very surprised if there was anyone in this room who would say, oh no, it's been really easy sailing my entire life. And so that's just on the physical level. So we get bitten by insects, or we get scrapes and grazes, and the body ages, and so then there are aches and pains, whether it's just through aging, arthritis, or whatever, and so that's just on the bodily level. But there's also the whole emotional world, which is a fascinating exploration in itself, because emotions or mind states, emotions, they straddle the mind and body. So it's not just physical pain. I mean, there's that saying that pain is mandatory, suffering is optional, and that's very important. I think, teaching or way of describing human life, that we can't really avoid pain, but it's the additional overlapping of why is this happening to me, miserable me, poor me, or whatever we do that adds another layer, and that's what we call dukkha in the Four Noble Truths of suffering, and that's the Buddha says is actually unnecessary. However, that might sound a bit trite, but if we really look deeply at why is it that we suffer, and what I mean by that is the emotional suffering, it's actually always to some extent something we are doing. Now, of course, in many situations, situations make life so difficult for us that there's a point. One can make a point that we're kind of innocent, but still, it's an option. It's a movement of the mind that creates suffering, and so that's the realm of emotions, and they are very complex. I have trouble sleeping, so I go to a psychiatrist at the hospital, and he gives me sleeping pills. Nothing very serious, but so there's a chemical component of our experience too, and so that plays a role in our emotions. Like take someone a well-balanced individual. I hate those people. I'm joking. But I do know a lot of people who just seem to have it pretty easy compared to me. And this is, of course, a whole other realm of why, of this creating suffering is there's a lot of comparison, this relative or relating to, and there's that expression like misery likes company, and there's truth to that. Like with my physical state of dis-ease a lot of the time, I think sometimes I look around, how are they doing over there? Oh yeah, they're also struggling with something. That makes me feel a little better. I'm not all alone in this boat, but yeah. And then I look at people. Oh wow, like my brother. He's like Iron Man. He just never if he gets a cold, he starts complaining. Like that's for him is like I'm sure he's had worse. We went to Burma and he was throwing up on the back of a rickshaw, and so he's had worse than a cold. But he didn't like it, and he was really he wasn't like moaning about it, but he obviously, no one would like it, but so there is, so that the realm of emotions, whether it's you can look at ways of, like I was telling my doctor, oh, I was depressed for a few days. He said, wow, and I said, about 20 years ago from my sleeping disorder, they tried to give me Prozac, and I popped a few Prozac pills and didn't feel anything, so I just stopped. And I told him that. He said, oh, now we have at least 10 or 12 new, really excellent pharmaceutical options for enhancing happiness. And I'm very skeptical. I don't know. Maybe it's partly just me, but I'm mistrustful of relying or being dependent on chemicals to make us happy. I think there's a point. There's obviously, I've had a very dear friend of mine, he passed away, but he had bipolar disorder and had several psychotic episodes. And the last time I saw him, or shortly before he kind of flew the coop, he was in a psychiatric hospital here in Bangkok, and they were giving him medications. And if he went off his meds, it was, he was super happy. It was really manic, and I could hardly recognize him. His eyes were all like wide open, and for him that was much more preferable than the sort of the sedated. But this part of the problem was that the drugs worked, but they suppressed sort of his joie de vivre and his he was very he had a sort of infectious bubbliness to him, and so there is a chemical basis, but there's also just emotions are complex. The whole field. Like I was asking my psychiatrist. Because he said, oh, there's all these they're really like well-designed and well-proven methods for treating mental illness. And I said, well, what are these instruments, or what are these? And he says, psychiatrists. So he would be the one who would determine like what medication, what dosage, whatever. And so that also felt a little bit funny. Like you go in, if you're going to have a scan or something, then there's an actual, you get an X-ray or something, or an MRI, and that gives you an indication of how you're doing. But here is like you're sort of trusting this individual. And so again, if it's me, so far I've done pretty well. There were times in my childhood that were really difficult, but that's more to do with I hadn't been given the skills. Some of it's just language, the ability to frame, to have a frame of reference to what is actually like, even be able to put a label on emotions and say, this is sadness, this is anger. It was not part of my family upbringing. We're very sort of Germanic, British, not Latin, Mediterranean, passionate, more of the sort of control. And I knew there was love there, but we wouldn't go around like, I love you, Mum, and wasn't that. But so that happened more in my teens. And so another reason I chose this topic is because if there are very few bhikkhus, like I know a lot of the talks here are led by monks, who will touch the subject, partly because, as you may know, they have these 4 parajika rules where if they transgress them, they have to disrobe and they can never reordain again. And so one of them is not killing. And in the way that rule or that precept is described is even if you were to encourage someone to go and kill someone else or take their own life or have an abortion or whatever, that if the intention was that you really wanted them to go through with the act and they did, then the monk would be have transgressed this parogical rule. And so there are monks who are just very confident and very firm in their practice, or aren't plagued by doubt, and they will, or they're very wise and they can navigate this subject. But a lot of monks will not touch it for fear of, like if I was in robes and I was saying, oh yeah, I really understand if you're terminally ill that you go to Switzerland or the Netherlands or wherever and take one of these. I think they have some kind of milkshake or cocktail or something that you drink yourself. And I can understand that because you maybe have 6 months to live and you're in a lot of pain. And but even if a monk were to say that, I kind of I can sympathize if someone were to listen to that and think it was an encouragement and go through with it. It could cause a lot of doubts and problems. So it's similar to abortion. In my opinion, this is a gray area. Now this is, I did some research for this talk, and I already had this intuitive sense that whether it's suicide or whether it's assisted dying in other ways, or whether abortion, it's not, as far as the Buddhists. If you look at the Wikipedia page on assisted dying, you'll see it goes through all these different religions. Unusually it doesn't mention Buddhism, but there are other resources that it's tempting. In fact, this is one of the difficulties religions have in general, is the inclination to be dogmatic, to look at things in black and white. This is right, this is wrong, to somehow have an answer. And so I feel that Buddhism has, in some ways, an advantage in this area, because it doesn't mean that as Buddhists we are free from being fundamentalist or dogmatic. It does happen. But the relationship to doubt, to certainty, to fixing absolute truths is maybe not, there's not as much pressure in Buddhism to do that. And so to live in these, what you could call these gray spaces, is actually perfectly okay. In fact, it's encouraged, because there's a lot about life that is doubtful. And so this is one area in which, what is the Buddhist view on assisted dying? So if you were to say, oh yeah, Buddhists say suicide is always wrong, categorically wrong, I think that would be a misrepresentation. I think that it's sometimes it feels safe, or at least temporarily, to try and take a fixed position, because then at least we know where we stand, and there's a sense of security, or we can have a good argument with someone or whatever. But I would, like with a topic like this, I would encourage a gentleness or a softness where you feel your way into it and realize that there are very different circumstances, very different, for each person it'll be, the relationship to life and to death will be different. And so I don't think we should jump to conclusions of this is the cut and dry Buddhist approach or viewpoint on, say, assisted dying or assisted suicide. When I was a monk in England, I was the abbot of a little monastery in Devon for 4 years. And with this remote little hobbit-like area in the West Country, and kind of magical area anyways. There were Thai women almost in every village somehow. Just out of the woodwork, they'd come with their, to offer food. That was one kind of quite amazing aspect to it. Also, we'd get these very strange guests. Sometimes we'd just get bums terminating, I call them bums, just these sort of like, what do you call them? Not homeless, kind of wanderers. They just, can I have a room for the night? And we were kind of on their circuit. Okay, you can have 2 or 3 nights. And then, I remember once I got this phone call, because back when I was ordained in the late 80s, or in 1990, most English people didn't know about Buddhism. In fact, I wore white for 2 years as a novice, and the blokes down in the English villages, I grew up in America, but I kind of caught on to the British mentality. They have a good sense of humor. They say, "Hey, Harry," meaning Hare Krishna. They thought I was Hare Krishna. So that was their way of, it was lighthearted. I never felt I was going to get beat up. So anyway, there's not a lot of Buddhism. It's increasing. There are Sri Lankan and Burmese temples, and then, of course, the Tibetan centers, and then, so I got a phone call, and a woman who was part of a Tibetan tradition, and I don't remember which school or lineage she was a part of, had committed suicide, and her school was very black and white about it. Like, this is a sin. She's going to hell. And so none of her mentors or teachers wanted to go to her funeral. So they were looking for a Buddhist monk. I knew nothing about their lineage, their tradition. And I thought, why not? It's a compassionate thing to do. The relatives are grieving. As I said, I said earlier, the pain is often equally great for the survivors. I think it's not easy to kill these things. They're amazingly robust. Okay, it can take a little virus or a little parasite or something, and boop, we're out. But basically, it's not easy. And again, this is in no ways an encouragement for you. But if you ever think about killing yourself, oh my word, should I jump off a bridge? Should I take a gun? What a horrible idea. Apparently men like guns, women like poison, but I don't know if that's a good generalization. But a gun, what a mess. And then what if you miss? Or it's one of those freak, the bullet goes through and doesn't really hit it, only gray matter and nothing really important. Sleeping pills, overdosing on paracetamol, all these options seem really unpleasant. In fact, in the research I did on assisted dying, because it's kind of picking up speed, which is there is a whole political side to this topic, which I'll only touch upon because I've learned to keep politics away from religion or from Thanksgiving dinners with my family. But there is, in my opinion, a concerning trend towards making it easier for people to kill themselves. And some of the methods used, say in Canada, for example, they use this as well, like these pods. You get into a pod. Sounds very kind of science fiction, a little kind of cool. I'm going to get into a pod. But if you're interested in the political side of it, and you could say the ethical side from the standpoint of our society, then I don't know if you know the podcast called Trigonometry. Have you heard of it? it's quite a well-known podcast, like Joe Rogan and Diary of a CEO. That we've entered the world of podcasts where they're pulling their weight against mainstream media. Anyway, it's very good. It's done. It's led by these two Englishmen, and this one episode, you can find it on YouTube. They interview a woman. I think her name is Kelsey Sheeran, and she's Canadian, and she talks about some of the things going on in Canada. And it is shocking. To me, it's shocking that she says it's basically you drown the people. You know, it sounds very nice, compassionate. When it gets down to the nitty-gritty of it, she says it's like waterboarding your grandmother. So it's pretty intense. And like I said, I don't want to linger on the political side of this, but I do think it's worth each of us familiarizing ourselves with. I know it went through the UK Parliament quite in the last month or so, this discussion of whether to pass a law to facilitate assisted suicide, euthanasia. Netherlands is quite big, and Canada, some states in the US. Yeah, so it's as I said, it's actually, I mean, that's one argument to hang in there, because it's not easy to die. Even if you want to, it's not easy to do it. I mean, of course, that's not the best argument to give. I mean, I would say from like a Buddhist point of view, you probably all, most of you have heard of like the incredible preciousness and even the rarity of being born as a human being. Now, from a, so you could say a traditional Theravadan point of view, there are different, are you worried about, okay, I'm just teasing you. That there are different realms of existence, there are different realms of consciousness that in this cycle of rebirth, the two realms or states of existence that are visible to us, which are undeniable, human and animal. We can see very clearly. We have everyday encounters with other human beings, with animals. But it gets, even for a lot of Buddhists, it gets a little bit, you know, it was surprising to me when I was in England. Of course, not in Thailand, because Thailand, you know, every house has a little spirit house. There are devas everywhere. Every tree probably has some tree deity abiding in it. There's deities, copious deities, and that's the Thais have grown up with this way of thinking, but not in the West. We have, as Westerners, I say we, meaning myself included, our conditioning is either the Judeo-Christian version of, you kind of have one human life, and then it's decided, your fate's decided whether you go up, you go down, or you kind of hang around for a while, undecided. Somebody's sort of, you know, like a judge, just sort of like weighing your good and bad deeds out and kind of deciding which lever to pull, or the more modern secular. We have one lifetime and then it's it. Lights out, finished. That's it. No more. In terms of the traditional Buddhist, or I think I can speak with most Buddhist traditions. Again, if I say Buddhist, forgive me if I don't. I'm not an expert in Zen or in Tibetan Buddhism, but so when I have a lot of knowledge about Theravada Buddhism or the Southern School of Buddhism. So that's what I mean. And forgive me if you're part of another tradition, I'm not including maybe your particular point of view. But so the preciousness of human life, how rare it is. And there are these 3 suttas in the Tripitaka. 2 are pretty much identical. You might have heard of it, the blind turtle. I see some of you nodding. Okay, so basically, I mean, the 2 that are identical, just to kind of frame the odds here, are talking about someone who has fallen. So fallen from the human realm, and below the human realm is the animal realm, the ghost realms, the hell realms. And this is all part of the cycle of birth and death. So one of the, you could say, encouraging aspects of Buddhism is that even if you fall, there's a chance to kind of climb back up again. Okay, so it's not like eternal damnation. We don't have that concept in Buddhism. Like forever and ever, you're just going to burn in some inferno. If you go to some of the temples with their murals, they're just like you'll see in some of the European, whether it's Dante's Inferno, or whether, what was the Dutch, there was a Dutch painter who did very elaborate painting. Was it Rubens, who had like all the hell realms and like creatures with beaks and people boiling in pots? It's actually it's kind of chillingly similar. Anyway, just leave that aside. But there is this, if you go to this is not just later interpretations. You actually find references to this in the Tripitaka of descriptions of the hell realms. It's not pleasant. So, for instance, if you're a serial adulterer, you've broken up families just because of one's lust and liking to conquer the sexual exploits. Then there's a special tree that actually exists, and you can find it in the park, with these thorns that grow out of the bark. And so you're born and you're naked, and there are these like wolves, these beasts that are going to devour you. So you have no choice but to try and climb this tree. But then when you climb the tree, you're getting impaled by, so it's very graphic that you find. Now, when it comes to these sort of descriptions, I would say, okay, if you don't want to take it literally, that's okay. It can be more metaphorical. Think about heaven and hell in this lifetime, of having a clean conscience, of not being remorseful. That I think is a very valid interpretation. But having said that, I've never really had a problem with this idea of these different dimensions or different planes of existence. And being born as a human is really hard. So if you fall, the image that's used is, imagine the whole earth is covered in water. Now, I don't know if they talk about a round earth or a flat earth in the suttas. That's a whole nother topic. But just think about the whole earth covered in water, no land, it's just ocean, and there's a blind turtle that comes up for air every 100 years. And somebody throws a buoy, and what are the chances of the turtle's head popping up into the buoy? Obviously very, very, very slim. And so in these suttas, the Buddha says, well, that's about as much chance. That's how difficult it is going to be to come back. But in a sense, everyone comes back. It just takes a lot of time. I mean, you also need to think about time as very expansive in Buddhism. But that's another, that I would say is a more plausible or more, you could say, convincing reason to be careful and that to think twice, even if one is sort of on the verge of, I can't take this anymore, I want out. Surely, I'm willing to take the risk that either, even if there is another, I will be reborn, that it's going to be better than this, what I'm having to deal with now, then I would say, personally, I would say, stop and think. I just saw some kid wearing that T-shirt on the street. Stop and think. I thought it was a good message. So the so just to rewind a little bit on, because as I mentioned in the synopsis to tonight's talk, that this topic is under the wider umbrella of just death and dying, and that we are all going to die. According to there are, I know there are people who, what is it, it's cryo something, this idea that you can put your body on ice, and then maybe in 600 years or something, I think Walt Disney might be on ice. Is that? I heard that rumor. So that personally, I think not worth the money and effort. And even if you were to come back, especially, I think they even do pets now. You can kind of put your poodle on ice. But if it's say a human being and they come back into a world that they don't recognize, their loved ones are gone. I mean, there's a lot of issues around it. But for me, it's just a matter of, well, actually, we're all going to die. It's inevitable. And so, and then the other side of that is we don't know when we're going to die, generally. We don't know when we're going to die. So there's this certainty and this uncertainty. So this is a strange paradox. But these are two really kind of key pillars in how Buddhists look at death and dying. Is one, okay, we're all going to die. It's just like the leaves fall off the trees. It's that kind of simple, in a sense. It's just a part of nature, the birth and the birth and the death, the birth and the passing away. And so we can make peace with that. And there's the story that often comes to mind is there was this Taoist, I remember in college reading about this Taoist sage named Chuang Tzu, and his wife died, and his friends found him. I looked it up. It's maybe not. I like my story better. He's in the bathtub and he's singing, and his friend is like, "What are you doing? Your wife just died. Why are you not mourning? Why are you not sad?" And he's just, this is part of nature. I am at peace with the fact that she's moved on. Anyway, that's a story that left an impression. And then with the other facet of, well, we don't know when we're going to die, then it's not so much making peace with that, it's more being diligent, being vigilant, using the time that we have left wisely and well. So there are these two dimensions or two aspects of a relationship to death and dying. I was recently, do any of you listen to Jim Morrison and the Doors anymore? Okay, so there's a song called Roadhouse Blues, and he says, help me out here, the future is uncertain, but the end is always near. So it's like perfect. Like, I don't know what he was reading or what he was putting under his tongue or on his tongue or whatever, but he was tapping into some, for me, it encapsulates those two. The future's uncertain. We don't know when we're going to die. The end is always near. We're going to die. And so that was just a few days ago while I was preparing for this talk. It seemed a good omen. And so that is, now going back to like the Buddhist view on, I'm not going to talk much longer because I'd like to also open the floor to questions, but I want to add before I stop that I did some research. Again, the internet's an amazing resource. There's so much there. And I found a really good article by a man named Damien Keown from the University of London. And he did this, it's quite an elaborate paper. It's really well done if you're interested in this debate. He talks about amongst Buddhist scholars in the last 50 years, there was this belief, because in the suttas, there are these three bhikkhus who, bhikkhus is the name for a Buddhist monk, who commit suicide because of some very, very terrible illness, like their head is being ruptured in two and they're being raked over coals, really horrible illnesses that they're dying from. And so monks are allowed 8 requisites, and one is a razor blade. So they and their meditation, at least with one of them, his name is Channa, Bhikkhu Channa, his meditation was very good, and he had very peaceful states of mind, even very high states of jhana. And so he thought, I keep falling away from this state of peace and tranquility because of this illness. And so how about that I just take the razor and, I don't know, cut my carotid artery or my wrist or something and go so that I can, in a sense, depart while... I don't know how that worked, because I think he was slightly agitated. And this is part of the argument. But with these 3 monks, it's not exactly clear what happens. It's very clear they're ill, seriously ill. It's very clear that they took the razor blade and killed themselves. And then the moment before they died, they somehow composed themselves and realized arhatship. They're so fully enlightened in that last moment. And so there's this debate that this whatever, Professor Keown, I don't know what his position is, but he talks about the scholar. He said that in scholarly circles, there's this debate that's been on for 50 years or so, where a lot of people claim that it's okay to kill yourself if you're an arhat. Because of the way these stories are told, it's not clear whether they were already an arhat and then killed themselves, or if they... And the general consensus that, well, his opinion and also the opinion by one of my main teachers the person that Prapayuto, who I've done most of my translations for, is that they weren't yet enlightened. And so there was this, just this, whatever, this aversion to the discomfort and the pain and the disease. And so, okay, even if there was, you could say, and this is again going down to the mitigating or the special circumstances from person to person, and why I think we shouldn't be too quick to judge if someone does try to kill themselves, take their own life, or goes through with it, because very hard to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and know exactly what they're going through. But anyway, in this, if any of you are interested in this particular topic, I point you in that direction. So he makes this distinction. He says even in Western law and ethics, there's a distinction between condoning and exonerating. I think is that the two terms he uses? Yeah, exoneration and condemnation. So that if you condone something, you say it's actually okay. But if it's exonerating, it means you lift the burden of guilt, or you realize that. And this is very clear. Like even in the, you may know there are 227 rules for the bhikkhus, for the monks, the main rules. And I think at the end, and they're very like they're described in great detail, like a legal handbook or more than a handbook. They're quite lengthy about all the different permutations, the different possibilities. And at the end it says the monk has not committed an offense if he's insane, like if he's temporarily insane. And that's true also in, I think in many cases in law, like you hear about even murderers going to, not being put in prison, but in a mental hospital, because they recognize they weren't in a fit state of mind when they committed the act. So, again, this goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning, that I don't believe there is a black and white, this is the Buddhist view on assisted dying. It's acceptable, it's condoned, or it should be, what's the opposite of condone? Help me out here. Condemn, good. Could be condoned or condemned. That it's a gray area. And again, I've never known anyone who is close to me who's taken their own life, except at least not. I know some people who have, and one was an ex-monk friend of mine, and he was Swedish, quite famous in Sweden, because somehow the Swedish people really took to his story that he had ordained as a monk in Thailand, and was a bit of a celebrity. And then he came down with this debilitating disease, where the body just wastes away and loses all ability to eventually to eat, to breathe, to move, to whatever. And so he did go to Holland and take one of these drinks. And again, I felt ambivalent. I felt torn. On the one hand, I can't condemn him. What would I do if I was in a wheelchair and I just slowly losing all ability, all control? So for him, it was like he wanted to go. That was his idea of going with dignity. And yet part of me, I don't know, maybe it's the sort of dogmatic side to me that, well, couldn't you have just held out a little bit longer, and learned something from the experience? I mean, I admit that I had these conflicting ideas, but I think that's part of working with gray zones, with gray areas. It's not going to be black and white. There isn't one answer that fits all. So, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Let me just see if there's anything that I wanted to mention that I've missed. Oh yeah, there is one. one last, and I think very important point to make here is that you may know about, you probably have all heard of the Four Noble Truths, and that so the first is that there is suffering, that every human being experiences some suffering. Even the Buddha, Prince Siddhartha, experienced suffering before his awakening. And then the second noble truth is there's a cause. It's not random, that like lightning, just a bolt out of the sky, or the wrath of God or whatever, that there are causes and conditions, and some we can see, some we cannot, or takes a while to see. And that the Buddha sums up that there are three, if you know about the teaching of dependent origination, it really all goes back to ignorance or delusion. But he highlights that these 12 chains, and later on, like I forget which one it is, the 6th or the 7th, is tanha, or craving. So craving is the cause of suffering, and that there are three kinds of craving. So the first is this idea that this being convinced somehow that all we need is more sensuality. If I can only have more sensual pleasure, I'm going to get it down. I'm going to have it all wrapped up, and I'm going to live happily ever after. Just the greatest food, the greatest whatever. That is that particular movement of the mind or conviction, it will cause suffering, because it's not. I was telling my brother was a bit concerned when he heard I was giving a talk on assisted dying, and just wanted to see that it wasn't a call for help. And I told him about this Buddhist, there's sort of a parable of there's this monk with a bowl of chilies, and he's eating these chilies and he's crying his eyes out, and his teacher, his master, comes in and says, "What on earth are you doing?" And the monk says, "I'm looking for the sweet one." And that kind of, for me, sums up the sort of, if you still think, it's just you need a little bit more sensual pleasure, and then you're gonna kind of solve the riddle, and then that will cause suffering. The other two are a little more subtle, and the first is bhava tanha, so this wanting to become is the literal translation, that the craving to become, and that has to do with identity, with so it can be power, position, fame. Somehow often we find ourselves in these fortuitous states where we're famous, we are respected, we are honored, and then maybe it starts to slip away, and there's this, I want more of that. And that has a flip side, which is vibhava tanha, which is the craving for non-existence. It's a sort of literal translation. But it has to do with the craving for annihilation. I don't want this state of existence. This state of existence right here, right now, is undesirable, is somehow offensive to me. I want to get away from it. And so I would say any decision to, probably, this is not a universal claim here, but to take one's own life, or certainly the impulse, I can only speak personally that I know what it's like to contemplate suicide, that, all right, it's like, that is an option. That is an option. No one's gonna, whether it's assisted or unassisted. I'm a bit of a rebel, so I'd probably go up into the Himalayas and do my own ritual, some sort of Native American type. Leave my little bag of my medicine bag behind and my passport, and then, whatever. I'm not saying I'm going to. I've given that much thought, but that the inclination, I don't like this, how things are for me right now, this feels unbearable, is vibhava tanha, the craving for non-existence. So in a sense, nobody wants to die. I would even make that claim, nobody wants to die. Because what you want is you want to get away from something that is undesirable. And so death appears as something preferable. But imagine it, like how many people in human history have actually said, oh wow, death must be really interesting. I think I'll just go and kill myself because there's so much to learn. I don't think so. I think because what we have here now, just to be able to have that thought is pretty remarkable. And so why go to something that's really uncertain? Even if it's some noble idea of I want to explore, I want to navigate reality. No. I think if you want to navigate reality, navigate the reality that you're in right here, right now, because that's, this is, the Dhamma is here, this is everything, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, is Dhamma, is truth, has a teaching to provide. Okay, so I managed to shut up pretty much before an hour. Anyway, I really do welcome your comments, and it doesn't have to be on this theme. If you'd like to, whatever comes to mind, I think it's, I welcome your contributions, participation. Do you mind? I can't see you.
He can't see me either.
Is that deliberate?
I can't see you either. So you're equal. I'm almost blind.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much for a very thought-provoking subject.
Okay.
I am against this assisted dying, killing, or assisted suicide, whatever, because I believe that there are better alternatives. And this assisted killing and so on is very much of a Western idea, permeating the whole world and so on. But we have our own philosophical thoughts, religious belief and so on. We should be able to find something as a way out. And I would like to cite two examples. One is that a few years ago, one of my closest friends, after a long illness, he took his life.
Hmm.
And he left a note to his wife and his son, that saying in short that the prolongation of his illness would be a big burden to his wife and to his son, so better that he parted from the world. And I have been thinking about this and said that what would happen that during the course of that illness you were to be assured by the society at large that we would take care of his wife and his son at the level of a, not so affluent but decent
Hmm.
life and so on. And concurrently, what would happen if on the sick bed you were to be advised by a monk on meditation for the inner calm and peace? Maybe the two activities might have prevented him
The second example is my own very case. 6 years ago, just before COVID, my eyes started to deteriorate. I could not read anymore. I used to travel all over the world alone. Now I have to be accompanied. And the past few years, I have been to the hospitals many times for the prostate cancer or other things and so on. And at times I had to be at the hospital. And a month ago, I had to be in this, I don't know, radiation electrical equipment, what is called proton. I have to be put and fully covered for about 15 minutes, 7 times. I was a bit afraid and frustrated. But whether staying at the hospital beds or in this semester machine, I have come to the realization that if I were to meditate, cite certain Buddhist prayers and so on, I was able to find inner peace and go through the whole process without fear, frustration, and so on. And now, since I'm going to be blind soon, I have been thinking that if the society were to take care of me, in the sense of providing the basic needs and entertainment, whatever, to be looked after, to be cared, and at the same time, to strengthen my inner self through meditation, maybe I would be more than willing to continue the life in a very sort of limited capacities, confinement because of the physical handicaps and so on. What do you think? Thank you very much. I have to get back to the seat first.
Okay. So, thank you for sharing those accounts. Again, it's tempting for me to say, yes, I applaud that, because I do. I actually agree with you. I think in many, many cases, if not most cases, there are ways, or at least, first of all, I think society can do a better job. We as a society, whether one talks about globally, but I think maybe more practically to speak about individual societies or countries, we all having a challenge. I think there's certain shared challenges we have to reduce some of the pressures on people that are leading them to want to make the decision to take their own life. I do think that, I don't know if I wasn't around 100 years ago, so I don't know what challenges people had then, but I do know that there is you could say a modern flavor or set of circumstances where we live in quite a fractured society. There isn't as much mutual support, I think, as there may have been, or that we could say at least could be. I do think that, and there are other factors. Again, in this interview with this woman, Kelsey Sheeran, she talks about really there's so many support networks, even things like diet, like the way children are being raised, whether it's the diet or whether the bullying or whether it's the pressures that people are being put under, that there are a lot of things that can be done that are preventative. But even if someone has reached a state like what you're describing with your eyesight, and some of your other physical, say, impediments, and the challenges that come along with those, that yes, on the one hand, you as an individual can find ways to continue to build a strength of character, and say whether it's through, as you said, exploring new facets of meditation, or finding ways that you're drawing upon your own inner strength to work to deal with your situation. But equally important is that we try collectively to nurture ways to support each other as a society, a community, a society. I think here we're talking about more than just a community, although of course community, society, they're related. It starts with the family, and then the village, and then say the country. And so that there are ways that that it's very worthwhile, the effort that we put into increasing the support and finding ways to nourish each other, so that when things get rough, I mean, again, I had a talk with my brother, because I literally, I'm 62 now, and this year has been so hard physically that I used the expression in a message to him. I said, like, my will to live has taken a dent, and that was true. It doesn't mean I'm suicidal and need to be put on suicide watch or, institutionalized. I'm just saying I'm having a hard time, and it's just like a really hard struggle. And I think as we grow older, I am becoming, ironically, less resilient. I mean, maybe not ironically, that's just, the body gets weaker. As a young man, I could go without sleep for 3 or 4 days. I would kind of feel proud, like I have this warrior spirit, kind of, I just feel, really strong. Now, just give me a sofa. And do not increase the pain. Don't dial up the pain levels, please. But that's a reality of it. And so he had a great sense of humor about it, because he lives in Switzerland. Because I told him I wasn't very nice, but a couple of times this last year I told my wife, just put me on a plane to Switzerland, sign me up for assisted dying. I didn't really mean it, but I kind of, there was an element of truth to it. This vibhava tanha, this, I don't want to be in this undesirable state of existence, and maybe death would be preferable. So that's the kind of the workings of the mind. Now I do think it's deluded, but it's the reality of my situation. So I told him, it's not very nice that I told my wife this, and he said, look, come to Switzerland. There are a lot of nicer activities to do here, So he was a great support, and that's a good example of, I have a brother who loves me, and that support network is what's going to keep me alive. Partly what's going to keep me alive. Like I said, I think it's a dual. There are drawing upon and strengthening our inner resources, and strengthening our support network with the people that we are close to, or even not. Like I said, I think societies, and I agree with you, I'm actually quite alarmed by this, what I feel is this trend in the West of, it's convenient somehow. Let's, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to put this in, because I'm trying to keep politics out of it, but, like during COVID, it's like, get vaccinated so don't kill your grandma. And so somebody on X or Twitter said, wait a second, a few years ago it's like, don't kill grandma, and now it's let's kill grandma. Because in UK, they're really discussing like euthanasia, like elderly people, Down syndrome people, blind people are kind of an inconvenience on society. They do take up a lot of resources, a lot of monetary assistance and time and support. And so, but it's a very slippery slope. And so it's, I don't know if there are Asian countries that are also following this trend. But I do think it's something to be aware of, and whether, you know, I'm not, I've learned that there are, you know, although Thailand is my home, I was born in America, I'm Western conditioned. I think there are good and bad sides to both societies, cultures. And so, but I think in this particular, say, subject, what's happening, say, in Western Europe and North America is concerning to me. But leaving aside the whole political dimension to it, I think whatever the time, whatever the era, that these are universal principles of helping each other, supporting each other, and that without, I mean, there's very, very few people who can do it themselves and sustain themselves, have the resources, and can develop the resources without teachers, mentors, friends, family, wise people in society, kind people in society. So these are, you could say, universal principles. So, thank you.
One thing that always comes up for me, both with Buddhism and the Jewish religion I grew up with, is, well, some of these rules were made 2,500 years ago. They didn't have people hooked up in hospitals to machines during the Buddhist time. They didn't have people who were in unbearable suffering that was never going to end because they were hooked up to these machines. So to say, well, the Buddha said blah, 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 2,500 years ago, we have to still follow that, you know, like, you know. So, you know, and that's a question that when I ask, you know, we still have to think that everything the Buddha said remains true now. The other thing that, you know, came up with this, you know, previous conversation is whether assisted suicide is a Western idea or an Asian idea. Well, human rights is a Western idea too. Does that mean that Thai people shouldn't have human rights? Does that mean that Buddhists shouldn't have human rights because it's not an Asian idea? So we have to think, you know, is it a good idea or a bad idea? Not, you know, democracy started in Greece. Does that mean that Asians should all be fascist? You know, so we have to think, you know, right now, it's 2025. This is the situation we have now. My father was in a coma for 3 years that he was not going to recover from because, and he was hooked up to these machines that kept him hooked up, you know, alive in a vegetative state for 3 years. He didn't want that. So how do you deal with these things, you know, with, you know, how much has changed over the last 2,568 years?
Yeah, thanks, John. I do think that there are obviously aspects to our modern life that are new and will require, say, fresh ideas. And having said that, I think there are basic principles to that are timeless. And so I think it's a matter of finding a good balance, like what you're describing. Yeah, but with your father or is increasingly the case, where people can be kept alive, prolonged, and in these sort of vegetative states, and so that's a modern challenge that definitely needs to be considered. But I don't think anyone would say, well, let's look to the scriptures to address that specific issue. But we can, I think, look at universal principles like what is consciousness? Is it possible that your father was still in any way alert? I mean, you know, you've heard there are people who are in comas who then come out of comas, and apparently, I haven't done the research, but I think it's true that there are accounts where they later described that they could hear, but they simply couldn't communicate. They weren't even able to move their finger or something. And so that's just one example, but I think it's also of compassion, of not jumping to maybe one aspect of modern life is somehow things need to be convenient, and things need to be, we need to somehow speed it up. And so maybe to just question that impulse. I'm not drawing any conclusions about your particular, your father's situation, but I do think that there are timeless principles that we can at least integrate into the discussion, and it's worthy. Like I said, because personally I don't think it's black and white. I don't think, you know, one family might decide to pull the plug, another family might not. And usually you have like a power of attorney, someone to make that decision. But I'll keep it brief because I notice there's a couple more questions, and then I know we have to wrap up very punctually. So please. Right.
And she chose not to avail herself of the medical assistance required to fight it.
Right.
And in her case, and I think, you know, in the case of people who are seeking assisted dying, could it be not so much that they have a craving for annihilation,
Mm-hmm.
as perhaps they have simply stopped clinging to life? Could that be a reasonable Buddhist interpretation of this assisted dying?
Yeah, although I don't think it was assisted there. I think it was self. In the case of assisted dying, if someone's making a request, like there are people who obviously who, as far as euthanasia goes, I'm not quite sure what that entails. If it's assisted suicide, then you're making you're making a personal request, and so the short answer, I think, yes, it can be a valid Buddhist response. That there is, I do think to some extent we should be the masters of our own these sort of decisions. And I have an aunt who had similar. She's a very wealthy woman in Germany, breast cancer, decided not to get any treatment. And it baffles everyone. Like, you could have prolonged your life. But her rationale was, this is something, illness that has ailed women throughout all the centuries, and so why not me? And so in the end of the day, we honored her decision. We didn't, I think even her daughter didn't like, Mom, you're crazy. It was like, you are a grown woman, you're a compos mentis, and so that is a form of, you know, whether there's the palliative side of it, where someone is in a lot of pain, and she probably did require some morphine or something at the end to accelerate, but it was the course of action that she chose. So I think that's part of the gray zone. I mean, I really the point of my talk tonight was, I don't think there's one answer fits all. And there is this idea of dignity. I actually still believe in, I think it's rare, but it can happen, of dying with dignity. And I would like to die with dignity. I don't want to die on my last thought, like, stop. I often wonder this, people jumping off bridges. How many people halfway down think, whoa, wait a second. I think it happens. So I see, okay. Yes.
Thank you for the talk. It was very thoughtful, and this is a big topic, as you mentioned, so
Hmm.
we will never come to a discussion where it will end. So, but I want to mention one thing that might be thoughtful for you, because you come from a religious background and so on. My background is what in the Western press they call ascetics in India, who were predecessors of Buddha, and Buddha went to spend many years or whatever with them. And a lot of Buddhism practices. So I still have those. So I'm something called. So what happens here? The monks who take the precepts in Jain religion,
Uh-huh.
they take the precepts and they are in the sangha, just like the Buddhist sangha, they are in the Jain sangha. And once they cannot perform or cannot maintain the precepts, they go to the ajahn. Ajahn is the person who's the head of sangha,
Right.
and then say, what should I do? And I think with the consultation of everybody, they decide. And in many cases that I know of personally, that the ajahn will give him permission to disrobe and say, okay, you go get treatment and then come back if you're still able to do so.
Right.
And a very large percentage of them basically say no. That's, I think, 90% or 90%. Once in a while, somebody will say, okay, I'll go get the surgery because this is straightforward, broken bone or something like that. But if anything even close to something that is final, like cancer and all, they will not take, they normally don't have any treatment, they don't take Western medicine anyway.
Hmm.
And they will, then the ajahn will give him permission, okay, you have certain number of days to decide, and then will give permission to stop eating. And they will normally die within 10, 15, 20 days, during which the other monks and all will come and help him slowly talk about the religious Dhamma stuff,
Hmm.
and supposed to get the highest level of understanding of life that he can get or she can get before the person dies. And during that, a lot of people will come for the last visit to the monk. It's very common. And obviously it's somewhat controversial even in India, where it's the front part around. So Jain monks typically do that, and Jain laymen can also do that, but then they have to go to the ajahn and say, look, I have these precepts as a layman, and I don't want to break them, but according to this I have to take this medicine, and I don't want to take this medicine because certain medicine are prohibited for various reasons.
Hmm.
And so the ajahn will make him a monk, give him the precepts, and that person may survive 6 months, sometimes 2 years, sometimes they survive through the cancer and all. And they will just dignity. And this is considered to be a festival. It's considered to be a great thing to do. And most Jains will be, to talk about it, I wish I died like that, with great happiness, great satisfaction.
Hmm.
And there's no reason for me to live because I have accomplished, and this will give me the permission and opportunity to accomplish my religious vows and other things to a higher level of, for those 10, 15, 20 days, or even before that, they will start practicing meditation or whatever practices they have to achieve the highest level of understanding of Dhamma they can do. So I just wanted to mention that, and maybe you can
Thank
look
you.
into that as to what the practices are. You will understand it better because you have the background to food, and maybe some other time we'll talk about that.
Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Yeah.
And don't go to Switzerland. It's okay. You can come back here to give talks.
Do you want to respond to that, or
Well, no, I think that considering the time, Tom, and I understand.
You can take a minute or two if you want to.
It's okay. No, I did just read about the Jain, and a good friend of mine is a disciple of U.G. Krishnamurti, who did that precise. He was Indian guru, teacher, and he ended his life that way by stopping eating. So whether coming back to give a talk is going to be enough of a motivation to keep me alive, we'll see. Thank you.
Robin, thank you very much.
Yeah.
This has been a wonderful evening. You've touched on a subject that very few actually did jump into. It's an area that everyone kind of likes to avoid, and as I get older, it's a subject that becomes more and more fascinating to me.
Thank you.
Anyway, I'd like to say a couple of things. First of all, this is the first Monday of July. We have 4 more Mondays. We have someone coming on each of the Mondays. We have Prop Pandit coming. Next Monday, I do believe. Dharma Circle next month, and then Prop Pandit 2 weeks in a row?
Yes, again, Molly.
And then Molly. Okay, so all 4 weeks are covered, all 4 Mondays are covered. So if you're interested, there's kind of an eclectic mix of people and ideas as we have today, and that would be great. 2, there's an issue of donations. We don't, no donations are required. I'm not too sure how we're going to work it. We do have a donation for Bonnerie, and sometimes the speaker donates to what we call petty cash, which is really just our Grab taxi fund, or sometimes it might be that I think the speaker needs the money himself. So that's an option we can discuss with him. So there are 2 boxes outside. The third thing is that if we could have some help picking up the chairs. The brown chairs go in this way, the white chairs go into the other room. And the 4th thing, I think, is, Joe, you may have some announcement about coffee. Are you thinking of doing it this evening or not?
Sure, some of us usually go to a nearby cafe or restaurant, depending on the weather, to continue the conversation, and everyone is welcome to join.
Thank you, Joe. And Robin, thank you very, very much. Thank you. Robin, that was a wonderful talk. I could have asked you 100 questions because it's an area that I've been involved in suicide
I didn't know that.
in my family. So
okay.
it's an issue. It reverberates. It's strange because it's I guess it's the one thing I would not want to mention in public. It's the one thing that you never want to mention in public. Right?
Yeah, no, it's interesting even mentioning that I thought about it, you know.
Oh, even that.